Hello, everybody. Hi, how's it going? How are you? Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Um, why is my screen doing this? Let me just get this out of full screen mode. Not entirely sure what's going on. Back up. There we go. Okay. Hi. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, Russ. Good morning, Gloria. So glad you're here. I'm streaming to more than one location right now. So I have other comments that are coming in. So welcome, everybody. So glad you're here. All right, we're going to dive into this. Let me see if I can expand this. There we go. Is that better? Let me know if you guys, cool. Okay. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Make sure that everything is working good. Give me a thumbs up or we can hear you, that kind of thing. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, let's dive in because I'm so grateful you're here on your busy Saturday. And so I want to honor your time. Last Saturday, I ended up going over, and I don't want to do that. I want to really respect your time today. So we are just going to simply dive right in. And today, we're looking at the moment after a mistake when your brain stops actually reviewing what happened, which is the event, and then starts putting you on trial. So your brain starts acting like judge and jury, and it's about to convict you. And this happens without you even realizing it. A big part of imposter syndrome, which a lot of people don't like to admit that they may have imposter syndrome, and many people don't even know that they have it. What is imposter syndrome? Well, this is day 4 out of 5 in the month of August that we're talking about imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is when you have some old patterns and some beliefs that have been developed along the way running in the background. Usually that comes from your subconscious mind, and it's usually a form of protection. So it stops you from being your authentic self, hence the actual term imposter syndrome. And it keeps really smart people playing small and not playing their full self, especially at work. And it helps, it's a protection mechanism to help people not play full out. And so this is way more common than we realize. And I think that there should be more teaching, more training, more exposure, more awareness around this whole topic. So that's why I chose the month of August to talk about it. So today it's when your brain builds all this evidence against you and, acts like the judge and the jury and convicts you and locks you into a pattern you don't want to be stuck in. So by the end, you'll be able to recognize when the spiral happens, and you're going to understand why the mind searches for confirming evidence. We're going to dig into some neuroscience. So today's going to be a little bit of a heavier topic, but it's not going to be some crazy university lecture type thing. I'm going to explain it in ways that we relate to in our everyday life so that we understand and we can recognize when it's happening. And then I have a practical 4-step method. 4 steps sounds like a lot, but it's so natural that it really is super easy. And it's going to separate the mistake from your identity, because when we make mistakes and we are in imposter syndrome, that tends to form an identity that we take on. And again, coming into the imposter syndrome. So let's see whether you recognize the private version of this. Okay, so when one mistake happens, a mistake, tell me by putting in the comments which one of these relates to you best. We're going to have 4 options. Maybe all of them will at different times in your life. This might be you. But letter A, when a mistake happens, your response is to replay it over and over and over in your mind. Okay. Number two, or B rather, you end up trying to hide the mistake. C, you over-explain it. Drop it in the comments. And this is a safe space, so don't worry about, you don't want someone to see. You can also privately message me just as the host if you're wanting to not have someone see your responses. And then finally, letter D, you work twice as hard to make up for the mistake. So for example, the next 2 weeks or something, you work overtime and you really try to prove to yourself that you really don't usually make those kinds of mistakes. So drop it in the comments which one of these belongs to you. Your first move, one of these, actually reveals what the pattern is trying to protect. So what is the pattern trying to protect? Oh, we've got some people dropping in. Yeah. Looks like, oh yeah, there's a fairly good mix. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. All right, let's explain. So each response has a protective intention that your subconscious mind is trying to enforce in this moment. So A, when you end up replaying this over and over in your mind, what's happening is your brain is trying to prevent a repeat. So it's really trying to cement this, and the emotions just flood and you end up beating yourself up over it. Number B, you hide it. That's trying to actually prevent judgment from others. That's what you're trying to protect yourself from. C, when you over-explain it, you're trying to control what other people's interpretation of your mistake is. How many of us have done that one? Oh gosh, I know I have. And then the last one, letter D, if you work twice as hard to try to make up for it, and I'm guilty of all of these, it actually is a protective mechanism that's trying to restore your worth and your value, because in your mind, you've just discredited yourself. So now you're going to work twice as hard to repair that. And none of these are bad. What happens is they actually become costly to you. And we'll go over some of these costs. But the costs occur after the useful part of the lesson is way over and long done. And the lesson has already been extracted. So let's look at how these events can be verified by the brain. The interpretation is a prediction about a meeting or other people. The identity verdict, because we're getting deep into the neuroscience behind what happens when mistakes occur. The identity verdict is what we call a global conclusion about oneself. Okay. So we enter into a spiral when a mistake happens. I know that I used to be, when I had imposter syndrome years and years ago, before I knew I never even heard of it. This was me. I would make a mistake and I would spiral, like literally spiral. So when the spiral becomes painful, your mind actually moves from I did something imperfectly, and it switches it around to this reveals who I really am, which we know is not the truth. But when you've got a subconscious pattern running in the background, like imposter syndrome, this is what pushes forward and consciously registers with you. So what we need to do is, when the event happens, for example, I lost my place during a presentation. The interpretation, everybody noticed. And then my identity verdict, I'm not ready to be a leader. See, there's evidence that I'm not a good leader. See how easily that can happen when you have imposter syndrome? We take a tiny event and we convert it into something that has a far greater meaning. So whichever layer feels like a fact when you're activated or triggered, is it really the true conclusion of that event? Because we are responsible for assigning the meanings to events. That's how you get many people seeing an event and having different interpretations of the event, and not one interpretation is wrong. So the answer is usually the interpretation of the identity verdict, or even the identity verdict. And this isn't about actually avoiding accountability. That's definitely, excuse me. Do you guys all have your coffee? I have, pardon me. Okay. So this isn't about avoiding accountability. Accurate accountability actually stays really specific. So what happened? What needs repair? What am I going to do differently? And then the shame is where the imposter syndrome pushes forward and turns all that into, what's wrong with me? Yeah, this is actually what happens. So why does the mistake capture our attention so quickly in the first place and actually run the show rather than logic running the show? And it's not a character flaw. Trust me on that. Okay. The brain has systems involved in performance monitoring. Okay. Researchers can actually measure the response after an error occurs. They can hook your brain up to all these electrodes. They can measure the response that occurs. It's actually called error related negativity, or they refer to it as ERN. It's your brain that is actually physically noticing that an error has actually occurred, and it's firing signals, and these electrons can pick it up and they can measure the electricity that's firing off in your brain circuits, because we all know the brain has electrons and neurons and they run through these neural networks, and it's literally electricity that comes to the end of a neuron and fires, and that's what these electrodes are reading. Okay, so the signal part is what we consciously end up picking up as thoughts, and it's how we adjust, it's how we learn and we improve. The important nuance is that when you have imposter syndrome, that pushes forward and overrides the conscious thought of just learning from a mistake, and it assigns an identity instead. So back to the courtroom, you're judge, you're jury, you're all of it, and you're being convicted right now. So the alarm is fast, but the identity story is actually a learned behavior. So what happens when this useful error signal actually becomes a painful identity conclusion? What happens to us? And this is where you're going to start relating to this. How are we doing so far? Is this making sense so far? Drop something in the comments to let me know that you guys are here. Have you ever spiraled? I know when I was in the throes, and sometimes I actually still do, I'm human. Your spiral begins when a prediction starts masquerading as proof, because that's the imposter syndrome. Yeah, that's the imposter syndrome that can push forward. And okay, so after the discrepancy is noticed by your brain, the mind interprets it using context. And this is where I mentioned earlier that everyone's lived experiences and their prior learning, your expectations, and even your current emotional state can dictate what you're about to interpret the meaning of this event in this moment. And it happens like in nanoseconds. This is why we don't often realize what's happening. And this is how the pattern forms. And then the subconscious takes over and says, okay, she or he keeps thinking about this so much, I'm going to make this an actual belief so that she doesn't have to use so much mental energy to think about it. We'll make it something permanent in the mind. And this is how two people can see the same thing and have a very different explanation of what they saw. Yeah, I have an example here, but I think you guys already got it. Your brain is predictive. Its job is to try to predict what's about to happen next. This is passed down in generations from when humans actually became humans. So it already uses what it thinks it knows, and it tries to anticipate what the next moment is going to mean. So again, this isn't about judgment. It's about recognizing what's actually going on. And these behaviors, I know, especially with me, I can relate because so many of them are socially rewarded. And I'm going to talk about what it means when I say that. Okay, give me just a quick moment here. I think I skipped a slide. Okay, here we are. So when we do this, a loop forms and it becomes a behavior that can reinforce the original belief. And remember, I said that's how a behavior actually forms. It becomes a belief so that your brain doesn't have to work so hard at keeping on thinking about it. If you hide after a mistake, you never receive the corrective experience of being seen in that mistake, repairing it and remaining it and renaming it. It becomes more difficult. So this is why we talk about these things today. If you overwork, success may be credited, and the extra strain that comes with all that overwork just adds to your stress. Okay, so here's an example of this mistake. You stumble over a question, and what you end up thinking is, I'm not credible. Your brain searches for another time where this happened, because that's what your brain does. And then it discounts all the things that you did right in that moment, and it just lasers right in on that one little tiny mistake, and it ignores absolutely everything else. It dismisses everything else because it's looking for evidence associated to that identity that has been formed a while back. This is becoming what the behavior is. So your reaction can put you accidentally in a protection mode from something that happened so long ago. And this is the sequence. It's not just one single thought, it's an actual sequence that occurs inside your brain. So a mistake happens, your body registers the discomfort, an old meaning reappears because the brain goes and looks for it. That's how the brain is wired. Your attention searches for any supporting evidence that it can find. And this is all happening within nanoseconds. They've measured this. The contradictory evidence gets discounted, meaning everything I did right gets pushed aside. And then you end up replaying and hiding to overcompensate. And the reaction, and all of this happens so quickly, the reaction feels like further proof that you do not deserve to be in that room in that moment because you just messed up. Whatever being in that room actually means for you. The verdict changes actually what you notice and what you see, and you throw away other things, and your brain only looks at what it wants to find to support the evidence that you have an identity problem. I know it's pretty heavy duty stuff. So which part of this loop costs you more? The replay or the hiding or the incredible amounts of overwork you do to try to prove your worth and value to overcompensate for that mistake? The reason the old evidence comes to mind so quickly is because the belief was formed a long time ago. So this is the case metaphor. I don't know if you saw the picture that I posted on Facebook. It was a filing cabinet, and it looked like there was a crime scene folder, and there was a picture of this case file, and there's like a stamp evidence on there. This is your brain gathering the evidence. And these old beliefs just come forward, and you're not even realizing that your brain is doing this and putting it forward. And so what you end up believing is, see, I really am truly not qualified for this. Your belief can feel true because the brain keeps retrieving that old information and bringing it to the front whenever a mistake occurs. It highlights the correction, the hesitation, and the unanswered question, right? But then it throws all that away, and it discounts the preparation. It discounts all the good decisions that you've made. It discounts the trust that you've already earned with this group, wherever you are, whether you're in a meeting or doing a presentation or a speech even. It doesn't matter. Your brain will literally discount all the good things in that moment and just focus only on that little one. So I invite you to think about one time that this happened to you, not something in the like life-changing event, but just, something small that you ended up gathering some evidence, where the prosecutor in your brain is like going, see, this is who she is. This is who he is. So can you think of one of those? Because the memory is actually dynamic, and retrieved memories can actually be updated, and they can actually be changed based on the beliefs that are running in the subconscious mind. And that's how, let's say, for example, two family members can remember an event in the family or a situation or a time differently, because that formed belief overrides what the memory actually is, and it changes it just a little bit to support what the belief is. But one thought does not erase an actual old belief. I don't want to give you that impression that we can just boop, make this go away. There is a technique that we use in NLP, and with neuroscience, that you can override those old beliefs with pattern repetition, because that's what we want to get out. The new learning becomes more credible, and with practice, and it's not difficult, it'll feel very natural to you, what I'm about to share with you. With the repetition, the brain will go, okay, now this suddenly doesn't seem so important anymore. Since she's focusing on this, we're going to try to make that a new belief now, because look, she's done this so many times. So let's reduce the mental effort, and let's make that something subconscious. So this is where we're going today. And here's what it looks like on the outside, from a neuroscience perspective for an ordinary life. Because remember, this isn't about being so complicated that even I don't even understand what I'm saying. So I definitely want to make sure everybody is following along. How we do it? Drop a 1 in the comments if this has been relatable so far. Let me know. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Nobody wants to admit that they've actually got imposter syndrome. If you're watching the replay, you can participate in this too. A lot of people catch the replay because weekends are a busy time for folks. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Okay. So when we spiral, we often think, like, the brain will come up for reasons that make the excuses for the spiral to look like we're being responsible. Okay. So it may look like diligence, but it is actually, and it can be, especially if you have imposter syndrome, fear trying to prevent some exposure. So these behaviors are probably going to be relatable to you because, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of them are socially rewarded. And what do I mean by that? Over preparing can actually earn praise. I made a mistake once, and it was the sky was falling at my old job. And I tried so hard to make up for that mistake, and my boss recognized my efforts, and it actually made me feel a little bit better that he's recognizing the efforts. But what I was actually doing is overcompensating when I really didn't need to. I didn't have to do that. Okay. Over explaining can look like you're just trying to be thorough, and working late can give the impression to others that you're committed to your job. But the question is whether or not all of this is good. The question is, Am I trying to improve myself, or am I trying to neutralize a flaw that I perceive I have? Because making mistakes doesn't mean you're flawed. It just means you made a mistake. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. Patterns that can hide as behaviors that we assume or interpret as being conscientious or responsible or prepared, or like we're doing our due diligence. You reread a message 10 times before you actually hit send, even though it's perfect the first time around. You apologize long after the issue has been resolved. Does that resonate with anyone? I still do that. And I catch myself and I stop myself, and we're going to talk about how to do that. But that's one that that's easy to fall into. Another one, you explain every reason so nobody can assign a meaning to your mistake. So they're not misreading you. This is another protection mechanism, but we do this because it makes us look, or we think it makes us look responsible, or it makes us look conscientious or prepared. You work late to earn back your credibility that nobody actually ever removed from you just from a simple mistake. And then you avoid the next opportunity until you feel bulletproof. And that's we're going to talk about some costs. That's one massive cost. So looking beneath the behavior, it might look like you're being responsible and conscientious and diligent, but it's actually fear trying to prevent exposure. Which behavior steps up for you when you're trying to feel safe rather than putting yourself on in an uncomfortable situation, which is exposure? Some people aren't comfortable with that. This is where imposter syndrome enters, not as a diagnosis, but as a pattern of interpreting normal imperfections as exposure. Because everybody has an imperfection. Not one human being is perfect. We can try, but happily we're not. Okay. All right. So the mistake seems to reveal the hidden truth rather than just a normal human limit. Imposter syndrome feelings can make, like I said a moment ago, the mistake feel like it's exposing you. You might believe acceptance or credibility or belonging actually depends on maintaining an image of effortless competence. But there is no one out there that has effortless competence. They work really hard to maintain that. So if you believe real competence means never hesitating, never needing help, never missing a detail or making a mistake, ordinary learning will keep feeling like you're being a fraud then. So we have to put it in perspective. This feeling is understandable. If you have imposter syndrome running in the background, it's understandable that you have this feeling, because remember, that old belief is now pushing forward and overriding what we really should be thinking, and it's assigning that identity to us. It's not relatable evidence of your actual ability. What rule are you using for competence? Oh, just go, give me one moment. Sorry, I bleeped my cursor. What rule are you using for competence that no human being could ever compare to or consistently meet? This is the yardstick with which imposter syndrome people measure themselves. They just go way over the top. And it becomes so stressful for you and mentally exhausting and mentally draining. And the goal is not to become indifferent to your mistakes. It's to keep the mistake proportional, and repair what's real. And we want to refuse that identity verdict that keeps pushing forward. When we fail to separate these pieces, the cost extends far beyond one uncomfortable afternoon, especially if you keep replaying it over and over and over. The case against you that your brain is built against you has a cost. And we always cover cost when I talk about these patterns running in the background. They cost some pretty severe things. One is your attention rather. If you're like me, when I had imposter syndrome and I would make a mistake, I would replay that over and over and over and over in my head and beat myself up all day long into the night. I'd have dreams about it that night. The next day I'd wake up and I'd be like, how could I? Oh, another way, that cost occurs, your energy, constant internal monitoring is draining. It is draining. And again, that's how the belief forms, because your brain recognizes that you're constantly on high alert. So it's going to form a belief so that your brain doesn't actually have to work so hard. Visibility, fewer risks and opportunities. It can cost you not even seeing an opportunity that is presented to you, because your brain says, whoa, that might put you in front of a group of people that's going to make you uncomfortable. So you're not even going to recognize that opportunity, or you might be so scared of it that you pass it by. The cost of learning, less curiosity, more self-defense. Have you ever made a mistake and then felt really defensive afterwards? Mm-hmm. Do you really learn the lesson when you're in defense mode? Not really. The cost of relationship, apologizing and explanations that nobody requested. They kind of side-eye you if this carries on. And that has an impact, especially if one of those people is your peer or your boss. And another big cost, self-trust. Every decision requires a mini trial in your mind. And again, it goes back to that exhaustion and this loop that's on replay. And rumination consumes so much attention that attention could actually be used productively for open learning, but your brain is so exhausted from it. The mistakes often ask for a response, but the trial demands a sentence. So it's going to sentence you for life. You are not good enough. This is imposter syndrome. Sit down. You don't deserve to stand up. What's your fear about making another mistake and quietly having it stop you from doing whatever you would normally do? You don't have to type it in the comments, but think about that. What has your fear of making another mistake quietly stopped you from doing in the past? This is the loop that contains multiple intervention points: body state, the language that we use, the attention that we give, the evidence that the brain finds, and our behavior. They do not have to win an argument. All these things don't always have to win. We can interrupt the pattern. We have to interrupt the sequence if we want to move out of that imposter syndrome. And that's why some of the evidence that people receive is just too surface level. What do I mean by that? Why just stop overthinking it actually fails? Because how many times have we said that to ourselves? Especially with me when I was running this loop over and over and over and over. Couldn't stop thinking about it. It's like, Linda, just stop overthinking it. But why doesn't that work? How come our brain won't listen to that? Forced positivity can create internal resistance when the sentence, your brain being judge and jury, when the sentence is already too far from the actual lived experience. Meaning that belief has already been instilled in your mind, in your subconscious, and that belief is going to push forward. And all the good stuff that you do, it's going to push forward, and it's going to discount all that, like we said earlier. So you can't just tell yourself to stop overthinking this. You can't just override this. You can't just be more confident because your brain is going to ignore that and still follow through with the trigger. And what your brain perceives as specific truths, it overrides any forced positivity that you're going to try to do. There's no way that you can win over what your subconscious mind is putting forth. Think positive. Your brain's just going to go, I don't believe that. Neither do you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be thinking like this in the first place. Okay. Forget about it. It actually tells your brain, skip the repair and skip the learning. Just forget about it. How many times have we told ourselves? How many times has someone else told us that? Ugh, come on, Linda, just forget about it already. Does that sound familiar? Prove them wrong. I've done that. I've told myself that. My colleagues have told me that before when I have been ruminating over a mistake that I've made. And someone has said, well, just prove them wrong. Just prove that was just a mistake and that you're bigger, better, whatever than that. This keeps your worth tied to performance instead of your actual skill and ability. The goal is not denial. It's a more accurate response in the moment. So we're not replacing I'm a disaster with I'm flawless. Those are both global identity claims. We want to move towards something precise enough for the brain to be able to test its validity, because we're catching this pattern now. We're seeing that we're assigning a meaning to it that really isn't truth. And so we don't have to be precise. We don't have to be, forcefully trying to override it. We just need to stop and question it. Let's walk through these 4 steps. What does that look like? Let's get there. So what is the exact sentence? And what is the exact sentence that my mind is trying to prove? That's the question. And it actually, if you just pause, that will pop forward because it's going to reveal a hidden verdict. So remember, you can't argue with your spiral because your spiral is your subconscious mind that is putting you into a pattern so that your brain doesn't have to work so hard. And because that belief is pushing forward and you truly believe it. So when we catch ourselves in that spiral, we can name the event. What's actually happening right now? I'm spiraling. What actually happened? What caused me to spiral? So in the moment that you do that, you're interrupting that sequence of events that your brain does without you knowing it. And now you can actually ask the question, what am I assuming? Because remember, when we were describing how the brain works when it comes to making a mistake and then you're triggered, your brain is looking for evidence that you're going to assume you're not good enough or you shouldn't be in that room. It's pulling back all this other stuff and throwing away all the good. So we want to name that. What am I making this mean about me right now? You've caught it. What am I assuming? What am I making it mean? And this is where we can actually override it. What must I believe that a capable person never does? Does that make sense? What must I believe that a capable person never does? So you're a capable person, but you can't help entering into this spiral because that's a subconscious belief. But if you stop it, you will allow yourself, just catch it. You will allow yourself to be able to ask these questions. What did the moment become evidence of in my mind? That's the question. What did the moment become evidence of? So if we're stopping it, we now have the ability to move back into the prefrontal cortex and look at things with logic, and those horse blinders suddenly fall away. And now we'll be able to see, whoa, I was just about to head down that spiral. So once you find the sentence, you don't immediately wrestle with it. First, Reduce the urgency enough to think. That is the moving into the prefrontal cortex. And it's actually so easy when we do the pause. That is the moment. So the purpose of regulation, because that's what you're doing, is not to eliminate an emotion, because emotions come from thoughts. It's to reduce urgency so that you can reevaluate or evaluate the situation and the evidence and choose your next response instead of falling into that spiral. So let's do a 20-second practice here. Are you guys up for it? Type me if you are in the comments. And if you're watching the replay, then I'd love it if you would participate in this too. Let's do a 20-second practice. Okay, feet flat on the floor. Notice in your body one place of tension, like are your shoulders tight? If they are, let them drop. Take a breath. And then exhale longer than you breathed in, out through the mouth. And look around and name 3 neutral things in the room. My walls are tan. I have pink flowers in my room. I have a certificate on my wall. And then the next thing, add the phrase, I am having the thought that. What was the thought? I'm incompetent. See, you're not worthy. See, I told you you were wrong. What was the thought? What was that thought that fused with your identity? You can now say, I'm having the thought that I'm incompetent. This actually creates psychological distance from the belief because now your brain is looking at both, not just the old pattern belief that pushed forward. It's now looking at both. And you're not forcing, so you're not pretending that old belief is gone. But you're interrupting the pattern, and the brain is now registering that. You do that often enough, and your brain will then create and make it easier for you by creating a new belief. So what changes when you name it as a thought rather than that identity fact that your subconscious tried to bring forward? What actually changes? Now we can replace the verdict with something that is more accurate. And because it's accurate, the brain is gathering evidence. And remember, the brain is always looking for proof, for evidence, because it's always trying to predict. That's how we stay safe. It goes back many thousands upon thousands of years. Okay, so we're going to rewire with a more accurate sentence in that moment. This is where the repetition will end up abolishing the old belief and rewriting new neural network pathways so that this new belief forms and becomes your new normal, becomes the real you that you actually are. And that is your authentic self. And imposter syndrome can begin to fall away. So your learning sticks better with repetition, right? We've all heard that. A habit is formed in, there's varying opinions, but 28 days or even longer. But when you do repetition, when the replacement is specific and credible and usable, your brain won't actually throw that away. Because remember, now we've got that old thought, that old belief, and the new evidence that we're presenting it because we put a bridge in between the middle, or a gap rather, in between the two of them. So we're going to replace that global identity with a specific thought in this moment. This is actually called cognitive reappraisal. It means changing how a situation is interpreted so the emotional shift can actually, or the emotional response rather, can actually shift. Isn't that cool? This is the stuff I totally geek out on. Yeah. Does anybody else geek out on this? Is it just me? I don't think so, but I love this kind of stuff. Okay, so the goal is accuracy. It's not about cheerleading. It's not trying to force positivity or anything like that. You're going to model these 3 frames, okay? Suddenly they noticed my mistake will become, I do not know what they concluded. I can just address the issue directly. Boom. Logically, calmly, no spiral. Okay. Another reframe. A real expert would know. That's when you're beating yourself up before, right? It can now become expertise includes noticing your limits, checking and correcting. Learning. You're learning. I made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes every now and then. Here's another remodel or a reframe rather. This proves I'm not ready. See, I told you, you weren't ready for that. It now becomes, this shows one more skill or one system that I can strengthen. See the flip in perspective? So now you've recognized the spiral, you paused and took a breath, which now creates a gap between that old belief because your brain is going, what is she doing? What is he doing? What's happening right now? And now you can choose the thought that is going to come forward. This is called neuroplasticity. I love that. All right. It doesn't happen instantly. This is going to take some repetition, but because you are a smart human being and you have a brain, you can do this. The key is catching the spiral just as it pushes forward, because remember, it's so easy. It just comes up without you even realizing it. So catch it in that moment, recognize, what is my brain associating this? What is it trying to assume? What's it protecting me from right now? Take that deep breath and pause. Change requires repeated retrieval. Okay, new interpretation creates new evidence, which creates a new behavior. Is your new sentence believable enough that when you use it, you're uncomfortable? If not, make it more specific. Because if it doesn't make you slightly uncomfortable, your brain's going to throw it away. It's not going to give it the attention. Remember, it's just going to push it aside. So your new sentence needs to have that evidence. Language actually opens the door, and your behavior gives the brain the new evidence. So what do we mean? We're going to reclaim our response in that moment. We're going to correct what actually needs correcting. And we're going to ask the question instead of allowing that old belief to just run its program. You're going to rewire through what you repeatedly practice, not what you kind of just promise yourself. That's why the sentence you tell yourself has to be credible and it has to be believable, because your brain needs that logical evidence so that you can override the old with the new. And it doesn't have to be a giant paragraph and a long emotional drawn out thing either. It can be short and it can be sweet. This step converts the insight that you're having in that moment into actual experience. Old patterns survive when the behavior keeps protecting from the disconfirmation of the good evidence. It allows that old pattern to keep firing. Small corrective action lets you experience, I can make a mistake. I can then repair it. And then I can remain present in this moment and not enter that spiral. So instead, here's an example. Instead of sending a long apology after a minor error, you can simply just say, I spotted the mistake and I corrected it. Here's the updated version. And then stop. Notice how you feel. No over-explaining, no running this replay over and over in your mind, no convincing yourself that they are judging you for your mistake. None of that. Just stop. Notice the discomfort that you're going to feel because that old pattern has been interrupted, and your brain is going to be like short-circuiting for a moment, and it's going to feel a little weird. Because this has been running for so long, it's now feeling out of character to not let that run. And this is a good thing. This is what you want, because now when you create that gap, You're about to rewrite and build more evidence that's not going to convict you forever to be remaining in imposter syndrome. Repeated responses then become automatic over time. And that's how a belief is formed. With the emotions that go with it, that's how the belief is formed. The practical target here is to rehearse your new response at the same time the trigger's happening. So you spot the trigger, you pause, there's that gap that's created. It feels uncomfortable, but you're going to calmly look around at the evidence that is on your side and allow that to be entered into the judge and jury. And then you get to reframe it. What is one behavior that would stop feeding the old program, the old case that your brain built against you and hung you over and condemned you forever into imposter syndrome? Can you think of one thing that you can do that would stop feeding that old belief? If you're comfortable enough, drop it in the comments. If you're catching the replay and you're comfortable enough, drop it in the comments. I would love to be able to see where people's minds are at when it comes to what they know they can do easily to break an old belief and an old pattern. Here's an experiment. I never challenge people. I don't like the word challenge per se, because challenge has a connotation of win or lose. I like experiments. The reason I like experiments is because experiments gather data, and that data is the evidence that your brain needs. Okay, so here's the experiment that I want you to run this week. Run a 24-hour evidence review. Gather the evidence that your brain needs to shut down that old pattern. Don't ask when it's happening, did I feel fearless? Because nobody truly feels fearless. Ask, did I respond differently in that moment? Because that's your goal. Use one real mistake, one small enough to examine so that it's not feeling overwhelming for you. But here's the experiment. The purpose of this observation, or rather the purpose of this, is to observe, give your brain that evidence. It's not proving that you can control every feeling that you got. I don't want you to misinterpret this. It's to encourage small, recent examples that are happening now that are giving your brain evidence that that old pattern is no longer serving you. So you have a factual event. Let's say, for example, I gave the wrong date. The old pattern pushes forward and says, oh, you're so unreliable. I'm going to ignore all the evidence. I'm going to correct it. And I'm going to pause, then correct it. And then my overall record now becomes, okay, she just didn't spiral. She paused and she corrected it. That's evidence that she didn't need to spiral in that moment. This can be dependable, especially when it's done over and over. So remember, you're going to feel uncomfortable, but you've got this. It's actually easy to do. The replacement is one wrong date needs correction. It's not a global mistake. It's not, see, you're not worthy mistake. It sends, just correcting it and moving on, sends an accurate proof, or sends accurate evidence to your brain. And did the feared rejection occur? What did you learn? Did I learn something just now? Because remember, when you're providing new evidence, and that gap is sitting there, that's the uncomfortableness that your brain is like, wait a minute, why aren't we running the spiral now? Right? You're telling your brain that this is something else we're going to think instead. So I call it evidence review. Instead of just falling into the spiral, we're going to review the evidence. Instead of letting that pattern discount all the evidence that's sitting in front of us, we're going to actually look at it for what it really is, just a dumb little mistake. And we're going to correct it and move on. And that's how you're actually going to rewire that old belief and create a new pattern, and that imposter syndrome falls away. I want to leave you with one sentence that you can carry into that moment. And this is your mindset shift this week. Okay, this mistake may require an apology or a correction or a conversation, whichever the mistake is, right? It's one of those, or more practice, whatever. Okay. What does it not require is a new identity for myself. This mistake might require an apology. It doesn't require me to get a whole new identity or fall into a spiral. This mistake might require me to make a quick correction and fire that off. It doesn't require massive explanations and a spiral. Get where I'm going? You're separating that old identity that your brain is like, see, I told you were going to make a mistake, or I told you weren't ready, or I told you shouldn't have sent that email. It's going to separate the two, and it makes accountability actually easier to correct. Accountability is just simply correcting it. Oh goodness, I made a mistake. Here's the right attachment. When people are not defending their worth, they can look more honestly at actually what happened in the moment, and more objectively at what happened in the moment. And that's allowing you to choose a better response. This mistake may require a response, but it doesn't require a new identity. That's your mindset shift for this week. So, how did you feel about this? Does anyone relate to any of these things? Has this given you a new perspective on what you're able to actually do in the moment when that old belief pushes forward and the automatic pattern starts to run? Do you feel like I've given you some tools that you can actually put to use and run this experiment? If you make a small mistake this weekend or the coming week, run this experiment where you stop, catch your breath, and create that gap between the old belief and what's actually happening in the moment. And that'll allow you to really question what's going on exactly right now, not just fall into the spiral of the old belief. Yes. Yay. Yes. I know. When I had imposter syndrome years ago, when I was in occupational health and safety, I had no idea. And when my coach, because I eventually got a coach because I had no idea what was happening to me. All I knew, I was constantly spiraling and just felt my value going down. And my colleagues were looking at me like, is she losing it? And after getting a coach, I got a coach to help me with my job, not with me, because I didn't think anything was wrong with me. That's how sneaky imposter syndrome can actually be. And when she discovered I had imposter syndrome, and we ran through everything, and she showed me some examples, real life examples, like what we've done today, I'm like, oh my God. And so when I came out of it, it's just incredible. It's like, when the light bulb turns on in the room, you can't unsee what you just saw, regardless of what it is you saw. You can't unsee it. And that's what we're doing when we're exposing imposter syndrome. We're flipping the light on. We're seeing the situation and ourselves for what we really are, not what the old pattern and the old beliefs would have us believe. Okay. If any of this resonated with you, I would love it if you want to talk to me further about it. If you've got some more questions or need some more clarification, or you may even think like, hey, Linda knows what she's talking about. Maybe I can get her to be my coach and help me through some of my issues. I'll drop my clarity call link. You're welcome. Yes. I love that. I'm going to try and pause, breathe, and what can I do, and think what I can do to correct this. That's awesome. Way to go. Way to go. You're welcome. Okay. If any of this resonates with you and you want to talk a little bit more about it, my clarity call is a half hour, totally complimentary. It's just we end up chatting about what's going on in your world right now and where you actually want to be. And then what working together might look like for you, what that support might look like for you. And that's simply all it is. It's a safe and judgmental free zone where you can just be yourself. And at the very least, you'll probably end up walking away with another mindset shift that I can provide you right in that moment before the end of the call. So I'll drop that link when I post the video. I might even be able to drop it here right now. Give me a second. You might be able to see it. Let's pop it. Ta-da! Here it is. Visit lindalilac.com. I actually have a link directly to the call. I will pop that in the comments, but there is a button on my homepage of my website. If you want to go to lindalilac.com, that's another fast and easy way if you want to do it right in this moment. And just click the Clarity Call button, and you can grab the time that works best for you. My calendar will pop up and you can snag your time. So yeah, if this is not just an occasional wobble for you, but this is an actual pattern that you recognize as something that keeps happening, you may have imposter syndrome deeper rooted, deeper seated than you thought. And, I developed because of this, I developed an entire program because I was so entrenched in imposter syndrome that when I found out about it and I worked to pull myself out of it and release that and let go of that and step into my authenticity and become my authentic self, I realized, oh my gosh, if I can fall into that, an accomplished, intelligent, professional woman with a fantastic six-figure career, if I can easily fall into that, then maybe other people can too. And I started doing the research on it, and it's incredible that so many people don't even realize they have this. So I created a phenomenal program. And no, I'm not tooting my horn. It is a phenomenal program rooted in neuroscience. It's all backed up by neuroscience and NLP. And it basically digs deep into your psyche, and you do it at your own pace. It's not you and I working together, although there is a complimentary coaching session to help you over a hurdle or help you cement something that works, that you need help cementing. But overall, it's a go at your own pace program that digs deep into your psyche, and it literally pulls out all that imposter syndrome programming piece by piece, because there's different layers to imposter syndrome. That's why we have 5 sessions of it for the whole month of August. So you go at your own pace, but it's on sale right now. It is a fabulous program. You get a really good workbook to go with it because the workbook complements the actual program itself. The two go hand in hand, and they work cohesively to dig deeper and work with you actually personally. It's not a generic one size fits all the way that I've built this program. It literally pulls you in your specific situation into the work, because one size fits all doesn't work for everybody or anybody, in my opinion. Everybody has their own specific things that are going on in their own psyche and in their own world. And so the way I've built this program is to work specifically with you and how you respond to it. And this will blow your socks off. And I know you'll thank me. I've had people write me notes, say, thank you. I can't believe it. I even learned more stuff about me that I had no idea. So, all right. Okay, folks, let's see what we've got next. Okay. So yeah, where do you often most wait to feel ready? When you're speaking, when you're posting, when you're deciding, when you're asking, when you're just beginning something? Notice where that protection mechanism is coming in. that'll help you with your imposter syndrome. And before we finish today, let's just bring one clean takeaway into today's lesson. How am I doing? I'm over time again. How did I do that? All right. Just notice and create the gap. That's your clean takeaway for today. Before we wrap it up, take that lesson. Remember, that old belief and that old spiral is not really you. It is a programmed response that you've been falling into that vortex. So just create that gap, and you know what to do after that. Okay, that is your weekly mindset shift. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate you. If you're catching the replay on this, can you type replay in the comments section underneath the replay video? Because that not only tells me how many people are catching the replay, I mean, that's good information for me, but it also tells Facebook and YouTube that people are watching my videos too, and it pushes it out to more people. And the object is to help more people, guide more people. So again, thank you. I appreciate you. Now get out there and remember, your thoughts change everything. Change your thoughts, you can change your life. All right. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye for now.